Before the French Foreign Legion became a legend in online military culture, it was already burned into history by war, ritual, and image. And for decades, one rifle stood at the center of that image, the Famas. This was never just a service weapon. In the hands of Legionnaires, it became part of a myth older than most modern armies could ever imitate. The French Foreign Legion is not remembered like an ordinary unit. It is remembered like a world of its own, a place of hard discipline, second chances, broken pasts, and men who vanish into a new identity under the French flag. That is why symbols matter so much here. The white kepi matters. The slow parade pace matters. The desert dust, the silence, the harsh training grounds, all of it matters. In the Legion, image is never separate from reputation. And the weapon a Legionnaire carries is not just military equipment. It becomes part of the story people tell about who these men are. For one entire era, that story was inseparable from the Famas. The Famas looked different from almost everything around it. Compact, angular, unmistakable. At a glance, it did not resemble the classic rifle silhouette most people associated with Western armies. And that difference gave it power. You could see it for a second in a photograph, in archive footage, in a training clip, and know immediately, this is French. That visual identity mattered more than many people realize. Military history is not remembered only through battles and dates. It is remembered through shapes, colors, and silhouettes that stay in the mind. The Famas was one of those silhouettes. Yes, and when it appeared in the hands of the Foreign Legion, it gained something even larger than national identity. It became tied to one of the most mythologized military formations in the world. The Legion already had the aura: hard men, strict code, distant deployments, old-world discipline. The Famas amplified that aura. It made the image sharper, stranger, more recognizable. It did not just say soldier, it said Legion, and that distinction mattered. Plenty of armies had respected rifles. Plenty of forces had long histories. But very few had a weapon that felt visually fused to their identity in the public imagination. The Famas became more than recognizable hardware. It became an emblem carried through repetition, memory, and atmosphere. That is how combat mythology works, not only through what a force does, but through how a force is seen. Most people will never read operational records. They will never study unit structures or procurement history, but they will remember an image: a Legionnaire under brutal sun, white kepi on his head, Famas across his chest, standing with the calm severity that made the Legion feel less like a unit and more like a brotherhood forged by hardship. A rifle can become part of an institution's public face when it appears often enough, long enough, and in the right emotional setting. The Famas did exactly that. Over time, it became the signature silhouette of a whole era. It represented a France that still looked distinct, still sounded distinct, still armed its legendary foreign volunteers with something that did not look borrowed from everyone else. In a world where military imagery can blur together, the Famas kept the Legion visually separate. And separation is everything in myth. The Legion has always stood between reality and legend. It is real enough to be feared, but distant enough to be romanticized. That is why visual symbols carry such weight. They help preserve the feeling that this force belongs to another tradition, another standard, another world. For decades, the Famas helped carry that feeling. It also helped stabilize the Legion's image across generations. Weapons change in other countries, uniforms evolved, global military culture became increasingly standardized. But the visual memory of the Legion remained stubbornly consistent. The same hard faces, the same ceremonial identity, the same severe atmosphere. And in that frame, the Famas kept returning like a fixed point in the mythology. That kind of repetition builds authority. It tells the viewer that this institution does not drift with fashion. It endures, it preserves, it remains. But every military symbol eventually meets time. The era of the Famas is ending, and the French army, including the Foreign Legion, has moved to the HK-416F. On paper, this is modernization, a practical transition, a contemporary rifle for a contemporary force. But symbols are not measured only on paper. The HK-416F is capable, modern, efficient. Yet visually, it belongs to a wider world of Western military standardization. The Famas belonged to France in a way that felt immediate. The new rifle belongs to modern interoperability. That is the real contrast. The old legend carried something unique. The modern replacement carries something logical. And logic does not always preserve myth. This is why the transition feels larger than procurement. It is not only the replacement of one rifle by another, it is the quiet disappearance of an instantly recognizable marker. A visual code that helped audiences identify the Legion in a single frame is fading into a more familiar military language. The Foreign Legion will not stop being feared because one rifle disappears. Its discipline remains, its history remains, its hard reputation remains. But an era still ends when a symbol fades. Because for decades, one of the clearest images in military culture was simple. A Legionnaire, a white kepi, and the sharp black silhouette of a Famas. Now that silhouette is going away. So, the question is not whether the Legion can adapt. It always has. The real question is whether a legend remains exactly the same when one of its most iconic symbols is gone. And that is where the deeper story of the Legion begins. Because once the weapon changes, the myth has to survive on something even older than steel. Memory, ritual, and the kind of reputation most armies spend centuries trying to build.